3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome to the Danz Newz podcast. We have great topics we're gonna talk about. Oh yeah. Oh, welcome. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. Oh, you welcome. You welcome.
Welcome to the pod.
Podcast. The Danz Newz podcast. Consider yourself welcomed.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Danz Newz podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Gidlow, aka Danz Newz. You probably knew that already. Hi, I'm Dan. Welcome. This is our first episode going out onto the YouTube, widely out to everybody. Typically, this is a patron-only podcast, so it's exclusive to the Patreon. You can get access to the 2 previous podcasts that we already have for $1 on the Patreon. Usually this will be like end of the month. I'll have the patron-only exclusive podcast, but I wanted to do an extra one that goes on YouTube as well and kind of open up questions to all of the patrons. Today we're doing a movie Q&A. I've written down some notes based on the questions, and man, some really, really great questions from the patrons. Thank you so much. Really creative, because I was expecting like movie specific questions or something like that. With my prompt, I was just like, ask me any movie related question. If you want to ask a question about a specific movie you've seen or that you like that I have, like you've never heard me talk about or something like that. Like, Dan, talk about Gone in 60 Seconds. And I'm like, oh, I haven't seen Gone in 60 Seconds. I've seen some parts of it on TV. It looks all right. Nick Cage is like blonde in that, right? And Angie Jolie, she's in that too. She's blonde in that. Is everybody blonde in that movie? Isn't Giovanni Ribisi in that movie? Anyway, I was expecting things like that, and the questions were really, really great. So thank you to all the patrons who asked the questions that we got for this movie Q&A podcast. And without further ado, Guttural Nutria asks, what are some of your favorite movie adaptations of books and games, respectively, aside from Lord of the Rings? You had to add that little caveat, didn't you? Didn't you? Well, I mean, you got to go Harry Potter, right? Because Harry Potter has certainly changed the game as far as like, movie adaptations along with books, going alongside the Lord of the Rings train and all that stuff. And, the whole boom of the young adult thing with Hunger Games. And it really spawned off a genre of young adult movies that were to come. But yeah, Harry Potter was, I would say, as a large one, because I was really into those books, and to see those adapted into really great movies with a stellar cast of actors and some great talent behind the camera as well, with like Alfonso Cuarón and David Yates, who eventually came around. And the series started off with Chris Columbus, but his tone wasn't perfect for it, although it was good to have those magical first couple years before you get into the down nitty gritty that Alfonso Cuarón brought around to the world of Harry Potter. They started wearing regular street clothes and Harry, like within the castle grounds. Before that, it was all just always wearing their school robes pretty much for the most part, outside of like when they're hanging out in the dorms and they're in their pajamas or something like that. That series really, I certainly think is one of the top book adaptation series to movies, period. I'm not so much sure about the Fantastic Beasts stuff. Maybe this third one that they're working on might be better. I don't know. But the first one, I went and saw it and it didn't really fully click with me. And I was like, man, hopefully the second one really pulls me in. And the second one repelled me further. So I really don't have any stake in the Fantastic Beasts franchise at this point. I don't really care for it too much, which sucks because I love Harry Potter. And, those tangential links just aren't enough for me to be interested. I don't care about Newt Scamander. I don't care about the lady who yells, Mr. Scamander, from the first one. It was in the trailer. That's just always in my brain. The lady from, her dad is Jack from Law and Order. He eventually became the DA, but the ADA. Sam Waterston. His daughter, Catherine Waterston, is an actress, and she's in a whole bunch of stuff in the last handful of years. And it's weird seeing her in so many things when I know she's Jack's daughter from Law and Order, because I grew up watching Law and Order, so that's a little weird. But anyway, either way, I think she's pretty great. It's just all those actors in those Fantastic Beasts movies, I think they're all really good. It's just the movies themselves, the characters and the writing don't do it for me, which really blows. I feel like there's so much nowadays that it's like, I want to like these things so much, damn it. And then it's just like, nah, just don't like it. Shit happens. You know, there's plenty of Stephen King adaptations that we could go into, you know, the It movies, the It miniseries. There's plenty of miniseries and stuff like that. You know, I haven't seen it in a while, so I don't know exactly how well it stands up. But the Johnny Depp movie, Secret Window, directed by David Koepp, written and directed by David Koepp. So he adapted the short story that was based on. And I remember reading the short story later. It was just one of those collections that Stephen King does of short stories, and Secret Window, Secret Garden was one of them. That was the title of it. They ended up just calling it Secret Window for the film release. But that was one that was really good for me. And as an adaptation was really neat because like it's directly lifting out scenes and dialogue from the short. Sorry if my throat's a little blah at points. It's a little bit earlier in the morning. And I'm trying to hydrate as much as I can, but it's cold. It snowed yesterday. As far as Stephen King adaptations go, they can be really hit or miss. You have things like Thinner, and then you have things like Cell. There's a whole breadth of things. I was really hoping Cell would be good because I read that book and I was like, I want to make this movie because I can see this movie happening. Then Eli Roth was attached for a million years. Then he completely dropped off that project and it just went into limbo. And then it eventually got made with John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson on the cast, which isn't like, they're not terrible picks for the characters, but the movie itself was just woof. I mean, they were doing some of the stuff from the books or from the book, but it could have been done way better. And I kind of had a pretty clear picture of it when I was reading the book. Almost like, like I could see the movie playing out. That's when I'm reading books. That's kind of how I visualize things. It plays out kind of like a movie. And sometimes it's nice to cast characters in your head or actors in your head as the characters from the book. Gary Oldman was my main character from Cell. He would have been a little bit older, but no, I mean, at the time when I was reading it, it was the mid 2000s. So he would have been a pretty great age. So Gary Oldman would have been my, whatever his name was, something Riddle or Little or something like that. Anyway, yeah, as far as books, I mean, the Jack Ryan series, I loved that series growing up. And you got some great movies out of that book series, like The Hunt for Red October, Clear and Present Danger, Patriot Games, The Sum of All Fears, the Ben Affleck one. You've had Jack Ryan portrayed throughout the years by Alec Baldwin and Harrison Ford and Ben Affleck and more recently Chris Pine, and then it was super recently the Amazon series. It's being adapted into a series now. I watched the first episode and it was pretty great. I did like the first episode a whole bunch. As far as adaptations for books go, those were a lot of the ones throughout my life that I've really kind of latched onto. As far as video games, I always thought Hitman kind of got shat on that movie, and it's not terrible, I don't think. You know what? There's a little bit of a complicated history behind it because it was, I think Xavier Gans directed that, or Gan? I don't know. I think he's French, so it's probably like Xavier Gan. But I don't know. Xavier Gans, I will say, because I've always said. Until corrected, he directed that movie, and then I think the studio took him off the project completely, like off the edit, everything, went back, reshot the movie, like reshot multiple scenes and then re-edited it without him. So there are two different cuts of that movie, and the theatrical cut is the studio cut. And then they released on Blu-ray and DVD at the time, the unrated cut that was the director's original cut, without the added extra reshot stuff. So it's all the original. I think I'm almost certain it's the director's cut of the movie. As far as I know, I could be wrong. It's not labeled as the director's cut. I ended up watching that and was like, I kind of like the studio version better, surprisingly enough, as much as I would hate the idea of somebody taking my movie and then completely retooling it and whatever. But I mean, I would need to go back to it now with probably a little bit more of an adult eye. But I found Hitman to be not a terrible movie, and it was kind of more in the wheelhouse of my interests at the time. I liked the Hitman series. I had played the Hitman games a little bit before that. more so like demos, and also I think I borrowed a copy from a friend once. And so I was partially into Hitman because I had played the games and I like stealth games like Splinter Cell, Sam Fisher, all that stuff. Which, man, they still haven't made a Splinter Cell movie. Holy shit! Tom Hardy was cast 6 years ago, 2013. It was right after Tom Clancy had passed. They announced Tom Hardy was going to be Sam Fisher in a Doug Liman directed Splinter Cell movie. And it's like, come on, make it happen, please. Please. Doug Liman went on to do Edge of Tomorrow. I mean, he's the director of the original Bourne movie, the first one. Which one was that? Not Supremacy. That was the second one. Identity. But no, I think Hitman didn't fully get a fair shake. I didn't find that movie to be terrible. And then it has a pretty kick-ass score to boot. It's like do 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 do. That's not a good approximation of it, but it is pretty neat, and it sticks in your head afterwards if you've recently seen the movie, which nobody has. And you know what? Timothy Olyphant is a little bit of a stick in the mud, and I have, for some reason, I'm kind of magnetized to him on screen. I don't know why. I haven't seen Deadwood, and I have the complete series, and they're filming the movie now. If you didn't know, or if you don't know what Deadwood is, it's an HBO series that was on, oh gosh, I think it got canceled back in the mid 2000s or early 2000s, something like that. I've never really watched the show. I have it on Blu-ray. I bought it a million years ago because I was always interested in watching the series, and I just haven't gotten around to it. But I want to get to it before the movie comes out. But yeah, Timothy Olyphant, ever since Scream 2, I mean, he's been kind of in my periphery for a long time, and anytime he's popped up, I'm like, ooh, Timothy Olyphant. But as far as like video game adaptations go, there's that whole thing of the curse of the video game movie and all that jazz. I think, what was the last video game? I mean, we have some things like the Pokemon movie coming out, Detective Pikachu. That actually looks pretty good. I'm surprisingly excited about that, just because to see a live action, quote unquote, there's a lot of animation and stuff, but live action animation hybrid movie a la Scooby-Doo back in the day. That was the big landmark thing. Or like Star Wars, you would say like Jar Jar from Star Wars, like stuff like that. It's like that idea. Nowadays, it's far more common to have CGI characters integrated into that Roger Rabbit kind of idea, but having like, it's just so common nowadays. It's kind of ridiculous how in the last 15 years that's really become the norm. But Detective Pikachu, the idea of seeing a World of Pokemon movie that actually takes place in that world is really exciting for me, because I want to see that. I mean, I'd love to see a trainer as opposed to like a mystery story set within that world. But at the same time, it's nice to kind of see that curveball, as it were. Because I don't watch Pokemon. I haven't watched Pokemon in a million years. I did when I was younger, but I really fell off first gen after the first gen. Like I could not keep up with all the Pokemon stuff, and there's a million other things I was interested in. So I just really didn't keep up with Pokemon. And the idea of getting into that world and cinematically is really fun. You have Justice Smith there from Jurassic World, an actor from the Jurassic World movie. I hope he's way better than he was in Jurassic World. Not that he was terrible in Jurassic World, but all he did was run around and scream. So I'd actually like to see him do a little bit more character stuff, and it looks like he's kind of stretching a little bit into a different direction as far as character-wise. So that's good. He's a little less stereotypical nerdy guy. Who's just running around screaming. Yeah, I mean, that might kind of quote unquote break the curse if it could happen. Ryan Reynolds is certainly on fire in his career in the more recent years. He's had Hitman's Bodyguard and the Deadpool movies. As much as I like, I'm lukewarm on the Deadpool movies. I enjoy them when I watch them, but like they don't stick in my brain as like masterpieces, that's not what they're shooting for. But like not as like, they're not the most exciting, amazing things ever. I kind of am more excited about the marketing season whenever it comes around to the Deadpool stuff, just because he goes on everything. And they get pretty creative with a lot of the stuff they do. So it's always very interesting to see what jokes they're going to come up with. And it's kind of like an experience, kind of like an ARG or like what Nolan does a lot of the time, although it's a little bit more overt, or JJ, where they do the little mystery online things where the augmented reality. And I like the meta idea of putting Deadpool into everything, which is pretty great. So Ryan Reynolds has really solidified himself as that character. And I thought when they cast him as Pikachu, Detective Pikachu in the movie, I was like, oh, because like his voice is so intrinsically linked to Deadpool. But after seeing the trailers and stuff, I get it. I completely get it. And good call. I don't know if anybody has seen the movie Voices that he is in, but he actually plays the main character of the movie as well as the voices of other animals in the movie, because he's like a crazy person who hears animals talking, and all the animals are also voiced by him in various accents and tones and stuff. It's actually pretty great. There's like a Scottish cat and a really kind of southern deep voiced dog. Also very weird and disturbing. So good luck with that if you ever look that one up. Warcraft, I enjoyed that for what it was. I actually didn't hate Warcraft. I think it was a little too busy. I mean, Warcraft was high on whatever it was smoking itself. So, I think Warcraft was really shooting for the moon and being like, I'm going to be my own movie. But at the same time, it's pulling out a lot of generic elements that I wasn't really crazy about. And I was kind of surprised because I would have rather seen it go into a little bit more of a, I don't know, like some of the story choices were a little strange for me. If you've seen Warcraft, it had, I think anybody can watch that movie and recognize it has a lot of issues. But at the same time, it's swinging for the fences and doing its own thing and being like, fuck it, we're doing this full blast. So you got to respect it for that, and it's not a bad movie to look at. Some of the CGI is quite incredible in it. So as far as just like a visual technical feat, that is very interesting. But other than that, I mean, you can't just hold a movie on just that. Aquaman, and along with Detective Pikachu, we also have the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. So that's coming around here as well. I mean, I love the look of Pikachu. It's interesting to see the legs of Sonic so far, because they haven't shown like his body yet, right? They've just shown the legs. Or have they shown like the silhouette and legs? Like he looks more humanoid, I guess, or like let's see. Let's hold our judgment. Jim Carrey is playing Dr. Robotnik. Let's see how this goes. I think I have seen like rumors that the filming of the movie might not have gone the best. Who knows? I don't even know. Let's see how it goes. Sonic, woo! Gotta go fast. Our next question is from Jonah Dichtel? There we go. Movie you used to love but hasn't aged well. Ooh, this is a good one. It took me a little bit to think, and I kind of had to look at my Blu-ray shelf for a little bit. And there's probably some others that are just not coming to my head. Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, the original one. Speaking of Jim Carrey, I was infatuated with that movie when I was a kid. Jim Carrey, I was just like drawn to him like crazy. The range that he had as far as like just motion in his face, the way he could pull so many different faces and like completely change his demeanor and stature and change his body, just the way he was with his physical comedy really, really, really just made my brain go. And I was so inspired by him when I was a kid, like him and Robin Williams and stuff like that. Genie, I was so into Aladdin. Oh my goodness, Will Smith, Genie. But I like Jim Carrey just really set my world on fire when I was a kid. So we had that on VHS, whether it was taped off TV or it must have been taped off TV. I couldn't imagine us watching the unrated version of that movie. Or not the unrated version of that movie, but just the theatrical version of that movie. I hadn't really watched the theatrical version until more recently. And that's kind of what led me to go, oh, some of this movie probably doesn't necessarily hold up as well. Just as far as like, if you don't know anything about Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, spoilers, the whole crux of the movie, they're trying to find Ray Finkel, the former field goal kicker of the Miami Dolphins, who is suspected to, believed to be the suspect in the kidnapping of the Miami Dolphins dolphin mascot. So they bring in this pet detective, this guy who specializes in pet cases. He finds lost dogs and birds and things like that, and also has a whole bunch of animals himself. And he's trying to hunt down, because he finds this gem from a championship ring. And so he has to go through the entire roster of the team from the year that they won that ring and find who did it. And so he comes to the conclusion it's this former field goal kicker who missed the field goal kick, all because he blames it on Dan Marino. He ends up kind of hunting down the trail of finding his family and trying to find where Ray ended up and all that stuff. Throughout the movie, he's being aided by his friend at the police department. Like the chief lady is always kind of trying to get in his way at points, and gets a little sexual at points to try to like get him to stop. And by the end of the movie, it's revealed that Ray Finkel, the field goal kicker, ended up taking on the identity of a jogger who had gone missing, I think, or something like that. I think that's how he got the name. A female jogger who had he either kidnapped or had gone missing, took on the identity, and then started going through like transitioning to become a woman, and then became the chief of police, I guess. And all of that stuff. So it's revealed, and it's kind of how it's revealed at the end that's kind of the biggest problem, probably, because he's like stripping her in front of a bunch of police officers from her department and like pulling off her clothes, trying to show that she's a man still. But she has boobs. Like he pulls off her shirt and she has boobs, and he's like, well, maybe Ray didn't have time to get Mr. Winky removed, and like pulls off her pants, and she doesn't have a dick or anything. And he's like, oh, and then he like turns her around and you can see his dick and balls, and that's the whole joke and all that stuff. And like all the police officers start going bleh, and like throwing up, and because there's a whole sequence where Jim Carrey himself is going through, and once he realizes that the police chief was a woman, he's going through and like brushing his teeth and washing his mouth. When I was a kid, I didn't understand that aspect of the story. I didn't get it. I just didn't get it. But I also was probably seeing a edited for television version, because we used to do movie nights where we would all put down the name of whatever movie we wanted to watch and then put it all, tear off the paper, put it in a hat, that sort of deal. And I always put Ace Ventura because I always wanted to watch that movie, because that movie just really, like I said, Jim Carrey, everything he was doing was just so amazing to me, and really funny, and I always thought he was like hyper entertaining. No matter what it was, it didn't even matter the context. Sometimes he was just being goofy. Like that scene where he's at the mental hospital. That scene is like, it's just so ridiculous, and the physical comedy that he's doing in that, and it's perfect. It's so good. It's such a great blend of director and actor and like material, but some of the material is kind of just like, who came up with that? So yeah, like I don't think it is aged very well. The second one is probably a little bit more watchable, but even then some of that has not aged very well. It's a bit of a mixed bag going back to those movies. Either way, there's plenty of great jokes and execution and physical comedy in there. But some of the subject matter, I mean, any movie that you go back to nowadays and look back to some different movies, like, I don't know, people like completely just getting rid of movies or whatever because of the content. I've seen a lot of articles on Blazing Saddles and stuff like that. And when I was younger, I watched Blazing Saddles and I didn't get it. I was like, I don't get this. Like, it's not funny. I didn't think it was very funny when I watched it. And then I watched it when I was older, and I'm like, they're playing with so many different things. Like, they're playing on levels with race and stuff. And like some of the stuff, yes, it's a little bit more blatant than others. And some of the things are literally just shock jokes. But for the most part, like some of the jokes in there are really, really good. And really well thought out. And I think Mel Brooks is a genius. He's one of my favorite filmmakers from, as far as like comedic filmmakers. That dude seemingly, from my end, had no fear. Like that guy made so many different, just crazy movies that I still watch and love to this day. But it's been a bit since I've been through his work. I think I actually gave my dad a few years back, like I think I got him the Mel Brooks collection. I'm gonna have to borrow that at some point and go through all of them, because I don't even think I've seen everything. I remember watching History of the World Part 1 on TV a million years ago, and just ever since then, I need a miracle has always been in my head. So it's like just stupid things like that. I remember the live human chessboard thing. Like, there's so many great visual gags from those movies. Oh man, we did a movie night the other day on the Discord, watching Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Movies are just great, and silly movies are even better, might I say. Lemon Zester asked, do you have any movies that are a must-see in my opinion? I mean, I have my favorites, like a must-see. I don't know, like there's kind of a couple different things you could do there. I mean, there's kind of like what you would consider the essential movies, like anybody must see these. Oh, that's what you said, must see. That makes sense. Or like you must see this because it's an important movie that must be seen. I remember seeing like Spotlight, and that movie just made me cry. I just bawled at the end of that movie. I was just like, that's so sad. And to see all that stuff bubbling up again is just sick. So, you know, there's certainly movies like that are like, that's a powerful movie about the subject matter that it's about, and it's about a real thing that happened. That was just absolutely horrible. But as far as like must see, like my favorite movies, like, you know, I'm a sucker for Nolan, like anything, like you know, the Dark Knight, The Prestige, Inception. I certainly think those are his best. Like Tarantino, Jackie Brown's my favorite of his movies. If you haven't seen that, like certainly Jackie Brown, Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction. You know, he has some really great kind of the quintessential Quentin movies that you know, you hear about. Recently I saw The Ballad of Buster Scruggs and on Netflix. That's the recent Joel and Ethan Coen movie. I love the Coen brothers so much. I think they're really great. Their movies are dark and funny, and the idea of them going to Netflix and making like an anthology. I think originally they were going to make a TV show out of it. It was supposed to be like an anthology thing where it's like individual episodes and they're kind of like shorts, or, you know, half an hour long, whatever. But then they ended up cutting them down and putting them all into one movie. So it's like an anthology movie where it's like a series of shorts all told. It's like a big book. So it starts off with a book opening, and then it goes from chapter to chapter, fading into the story, like, you know, the visual short. So, and it's all directed and written by them or adapted by them. I think they're adapting short stories. So I watched The Ballad of Buster Scruggs recently, and that movie really, really impressed me. Or, well, I guess, yeah, the anthology. I love anthology movies. You know, I really like the ABCs of Death 1 and 2. A few of the VHS movies are pretty good. And I've seen a handful of, you know, these like horror anthology short movies. I don't know if I've ever seen one that was like, although, you know, this still kind of goes along the lines of almost like the ABCs of Death. There's like a death in every single one of these shorts in The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. And it is a little bit macabre. So it's not like full on, you know, none of them are really happy. So I haven't really seen any sort of like any other version of a anthology short movie that weren't either like darkly toned or, you know, there's never an uplifting one mixed in with a little bit of drama stuff. It's always just, well, I guess ABCs of Death is a mixed bag. Some of them are comedy, some of them are, I mean, all of them are horror, and I think somebody has to die in each one of them. So there's always some death. So then you have that subject matter, which always kind of brings things down sometimes. There's a lot of just different filmmakers that are pretty much the filmmakers to look out for. Scorsese, Tarantino, Nolan, some of my faves. As far as like movies, if you need like specific movies that are like some of my faves that maybe I think are must watches, like maybe the kind of more obscure movies that I think are the tops that are that people haven't necessarily seen. And maybe you've heard me talk about these before, but like I said, Jackie Brown, I think that's probably the most underrated of Tarantino's movies, but his best in my opinion. Although I think people have kind of come around on it. When I watched it first about 7 years ago, I had never heard barely anything about Jackie Brown before I had seen it. And then after I saw it, I was like, how come nobody talks about this movie like all of his other movies? And I had just gone through Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs. So I had never seen those movies, and I had just watched those. And then I watched Jackie Brown, and I was like, you know, those movies were certainly like really, really amazing. Like, and I see how they changed the cinematic landscape in the way that they did. But Jackie Brown is just a great movie, period. Like, no flashy anything. Like, it's just a good movie as far as like, and that's Tarantino adapting something. It's not Tarantino allowing himself to go off the walls. You know, he's actually adapting a story, which is kind of neat. He should do more of. As far as Nolan stuff, Inception, The Prestige, Dark Knight, like those are my top favorite of his movies. It's tough for me to kind of say one's better than the other, but I think The Prestige might be a little bit more underlooked of his movies, and that movie, if you have not seen it, is so good. I highly recommend it. Insomnia is a really good one of his. That's Al Pacino and Robin Williams working with Christopher Nolan, the director of the the Dark Knight trilogy, and Inception and Interstellar and stuff. Like, that movie is such a great, just crime drama kind of, you know, messes with your mind, man. It's pretty great. So if you haven't seen that one, definitely check it out. It's solid. It's one of his earlier movies. It's the first movie he did after Memento, and just before Batman Begins. American Psycho. You're probably going to see a lot of Christian Bale on this list, because I love Christian Bale. He's one of my favorite actors. Al Pacino used to be one of my favorite my favorite actor when I was younger. And then Christian Bale just really like started lighting my world on fire by just doing so many of these powerhouse performances in movies like American Psycho and The Dark Knight and Batman, just all the Batman movies. The Machinist is a really great Christian Bale one. Just seeing the extent that he goes for his movies. Not only does he go the more than insane extra mile by losing so much weight to play that role, it's also a good movie to boot. It's a bit of a psychological thriller / drama sort of deal. And Christian Bale is great. Jason Lee is great in it. I can't remember any other actors who are in that movie. Sam Fisher himself, Mr. Michael Ironside. Michael Ironside's in that, and he's pretty great. So, you know, you have a pretty good cast in there, but also a great story. And I know that filmmaker went on to do other movies that I wasn't necessarily super interested in. And it's kind of disappointing because I thought he showed a lot of promise with that first movie. But yeah, you know, who knows? He did that Vanishing movie or whatever, that Vanishing on 7th Street or whatever it was called. I think it was that thing where there were monsters that you couldn't see. Hey, it's like that one movie with Sandra Bullock. Miss Congeniality. All right. Jokes, people. Jokes. Shawshank Redemption, that's always one of my favorites. Edgar Wright's Cornetto trilogy, Hot Fuzz, Shaun of the Dead, World's End, all three of those are kind of tangentially linked. Just through the creative force behind it, with Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright writing those and Edgar Wright directing them, and them starring Nick Frost and Simon Pegg and all those peeps, and kind of the rotating cast of Martin Freeman popping in either for a cameo or actually being in the movie a little bit more in The World's End. So that was pretty nice. But yeah, those movies are all great, and I recommend them all. I think ultimately, if I'm going to recommend one more movie that I think is kind of a must-see, quote unquote, if you have never really dipped your toes into foreign cinema or even like French cinema, there's a movie called Delicatessen that is really, really good. I love that movie so much. Liz had mentioned it, I think, way back in 2013. And we had tried to hunt down a copy and watch this like really crappy quality version at the time. And eventually it went on Netflix. I remember seeing it on Netflix, and I own it on Blu-ray now. But we went and saw it at the Alamo because it was playing at the Alamo Draft House. And there was a chance to see it on the big screen with like a full crowd of people. And we went and saw it. It was so amazing. From seeing it to that really low quality version that we had before to watching it on the big screen, it was insane how it, despite a movie, I mean, it was a movie that was filmed in the 90s, I think the early 90s or the late 80s, one of the two. But it looked like it was filmed yesterday. Like, it was crazy how crisp it was on the big screen. Blew my mind. But that's a fun, creative movie from the guy who made, from Jean-Pierre Jeunet and, Caro. Marc Caro? Marc Caro. Jean-Pierre Jeunet and Marc Caro directed, or like co-directed Delicatessen. Jean-Pierre Jeunet made like City of Lost Children, and he eventually went on to do the 4th Alien movie, Alien Resurrection. So if you ever wondered why Alien Resurrection is so weird, it was made by like a super surrealist French filmmaker. I don't know why they chose him to do that, but that's why Ron Perlman's in it. He was in City of Lost Children, which is an interesting movie. I've never finished it. We got like the majority of the way through, and we didn't finish it. I think we were falling asleep. Not because it was a boring movie, but sometimes my eyes go a little cross when I'm reading subtitles at some point, especially on such a visually interesting movie. I want to look at the picture, not the subtitles sometimes, because Jean-Pierre Jeunet fills his frame up like crazy. And Marc Caro, or Caro, I don't know how to say French names. I'm terrible. He was actually the production designer as well for Delicatessen. So like they're clearly like artists. They are really interested in filling a unique frame. I think just the opening credits to Delicatessen is outrageously creative and already like takes you into the movie like this is going to be an interesting film. If you want to know any of the plot for that movie, just because like basic setup, it's actually like the post-apocalypse, and there is a like nearly full up building that this kind of traveling Frenchman, because they're all French, traveling guy. I think he was from a circus, actually. He's kind of coming around looking for a place to stay or live, and he hooks up with this apartment building that's connected to the owner of the building's delicatessen, that they end up voting tenants from the apartment to kill and eat out of the delicatessen. That's the basic premise. Enjoy. It's a good one. So yeah, thank you for that question, Lemon Zester. And Lemon Zester's next question: if you could redo any movie / make a prequel in the same universe, what would you like to see? Ooh, that's a juicy one. I have seen the idea of a Michael Keaton Batman Beyond movie floated around, and I think Kevin Smith has talked about this a little bit. That's incredibly appealing to me. I mentioned it to the Geekvolution guys, to Captain Logan, and he was a little less on top of it. And I think Eric, if y'all watch Geekvolution, Captain Logan and Eric, they do a series of, a variety of topics where they talk about, mainly within geek culture, Star Trek, James Bond, the superhero, a lot of the superhero stuff. Captain Logan does Superhero Rewind. Either way, long time relationship with those guys. They're super awesome. I've been doing stuff more with them recently. We're going to be doing a Batman the Animated Series commentary and getting that back going, because we were doing that throughout the last few years, actually. So Bat Chat's coming back on Geekvolution. Either way, I mentioned it to them, and they were saying Michael Keaton just doesn't seem old enough to play old Bruce Wayne. I'm like, what? Like, Vulture traditionally is kind of an older villain, and like, he's pretty wrinkly looking. Is he not old enough to play old Bruce Wayne? I mean, they can even age him up if that makes you feel better. But like, just in general, the idea of like having him as old Bruce Wayne, they bring in a Terry McGinnis character, I think it'd be really good. I mean, maybe not. I don't know. But the idea of that sounds really cool to me. The idea of Michael Keaton returning to Batman sounds really neat. I think at some point, if they did some sort of tangential, like bringing back all the old Batman as much as possible, maybe even a nod to Adam West, that'd be amazing. In a cinematic form, kind of like the Spider-Verse movie did by winking to a lot of, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, but not actually referencing. Although supposedly they wanted all three of those Spider-Men. They wanted Andrew Garfield, and Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland Spider-Man in the Spider-Verse movie. So the idea of doing that within the DC universe is kind of neat. But either way, I would love to see Michael Keaton come back as Batman, because that dude was my Batman. As much as Kevin Conroy was my Batman and Adam West was my Batman, Nicholson, Ledger, and Hamill are my Jokers. I like those are the names synonymous with those characters for me right now. Leto, unfortunately, I don't even know if he's even coming back as the Joker at any point. I know he's playing Morbius. for doing a Marvel thing. That's a Marvel thing, right? Or is that DC? I don't know anything anymore. I am not a big deep diver into the comic culture. I mean, as much as I love Batman and I know a lot about Batman and his rogues gallery and stuff, I'm like, I've read a lot of the major arcs for Batman, so I have a little bit more of a knowledge, and I've consumed way more Batman media than anything else. The only reason I know a lot of Marvel stuff is because the movies are really doing a pretty good job at fleshing stuff out, and I do a little bit of extra homework in regards to looking up stuff for characters that I'm interested in within the MCU or whatever. And like, I watch plenty of other geeky things where people who are way more knowledgeable, much like Geekvolution, they're way more knowledgeable about Batman than I am. That's where I get a lot of my information or nods to where to go or look for information in regards to certain characters that I might be more inclined to learn about. Yeah, I think Michael Keaton Batman would be incredible, and I would love them to do that. Please do that in the same universe. It would work. Batman Beyond, Michael Keaton co-star, bring in a hot young lad to play Terry McGinnis, or not. You don't even have to do Terry McGinnis. You can do you can do your own effing thing. It could be that Batman never had a Robin, so he brings in, well, I mean, it makes sense. It would be kind of cool if he was a Batman that never had a Robin, and that's kind of how they could play into that aspect of it. Like he kind of treats Terry. Well, obviously, I think he kind of always says, does he have kid gloves with Terry at first, or does he really push him into the deep end? It's been a bit since I've really kind of gone through and devoured Batman Beyond. I need to go back through that. Does anybody have DC All Access? Is that any good? Should I get that at some point? Is it worth it? I haven't caught up on the Batman movies, animated movies, in a long time, and I don't own a lot of them, so I would kind of be interested in maybe trying that out for a couple months just to catch up on Batman movies. Not to watch Batman Beyond I don't even know if that's on there, but I know they have the remastered Batman the Animated Series on there, and I don't have that, so I have the complete series of the animated series and Batman Beyond on DVD, but not on Blu-ray. And I actually have the DVD of just the animated series signed by Kevin Conroy. The other one, my Batman Beyond one, isn't signed. Wah, wah. I got to get the guy who does Terry McGinnis, but I never see him at cons or anything, at least that I know of. I could be, just missing him. Simon Bouchard asked, movie/movies you can't believe you haven't seen yet. This is a deep cut list because I've been talking about for years and years, and I'm going to start doing it this year. This year will be the launch of this series. I swear we're going to start the essentials. The essentials, the idea is these are movies that are important to filmmaking as a whole, or just, film as a whole, that I've never seen in my life. I've only heard good things throughout my entire life. I've heard how important these movies are, but I've never seen them. And there are a bunch of them. Some of the quintessential movies that you would assume a film, quote, unquote, buff would have seen. I unquoted before I got to the buff. Anyway, there's been a million movies I'm surprised I haven't seen yet. Citizen Kane, Casablanca, Apocalypse Now, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I haven't seen any of the Studio Ghibli movies. Or Miyazaki movies, period. A Clockwork Orange, I've only seen. That's a tough movie to get through. Okay, the first time I watched it, I was like, I got 20 minutes in and I was like, why am I watching this? And the second time I got further, but then I can't remember why we stopped watching it, but we got like halfway through it. I haven't gotten past the point where he's like gotten captured, so I need to finish that movie. Damn it. I love Kubrick, but that movie is tough restarting so many times. One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest. I've never seen that. I haven't seen any Wes Anderson movies outside of half of the Grand Budapest Hotel. And I did see all of Steve Zissou. That's the only movie of his that I have seen. But at the time, I found that one to be pretty weird. Not that I was put off by it, but it was still a little like... There are points during the movie that was like, this must be a dream sequence, and then it really wasn't. And I was like, what the fuck just happened as a kid? I need to go back and watch his movies, especially with an adult eye. But I've seen plenty of clips of his movies throughout the years. I've just never seen more than one of his movies all the way through. I've never seen Princess Bride. I remember bringing that up in a Skype call with Max a million years ago. This was like before the first Creature House. And they were just like laughing. They were like, you haven't seen like, and was like so surprised, you haven't seen The Princess Bride? And I was like, is it not inconceivable that I haven't seen a movie? Like, why are you so surprised? And they're like, hold on. Did you just make a reference to the movie? And I was like, no, what? And they're like, that's a whole thing in the movie, is like a character saying like inconceivable. It's like, I haven't seen it. I don't know. At this point, I've seen that clip now. Inconceivable. Like Sean Wallace. I love Sean Wallace, or Wallace Shawn, not Sean Wallace. Who the hell is Sean Wallace? I love Wallace Shawn. Amazing actor. And he's been in a million things throughout my life. Either way, I have not seen that movie still, and it's a crime, I guess, from what I've been told throughout my life. I've never seen Weekend at Bernie's. Is that a classic? I don't even know. No, there's plenty of filmmakers' back catalogs that I would love to dive in fresh at some point, just because like I've seen some Scorsese movies, like I've seen Taxi Driver, I've seen the Infernal Affairs remake, The Departed. I've seen that. I've seen a handful of his movies, Goodfellas, but like I haven't seen Casino. I've heard only great things about Casino. So, there's a good chunk of movies that I've never seen. Some that I've heard are, pretty quintessential to film history, and others that are just very popular that I've never seen. If you're ever interested, there's a website called Letterboxd, letter like LETTERBOXD.com. If you do letterboxd.com/user/Danz Newz, or it's just like /Danz Newz, I have a compilation, and I think at this point it's over 2,000 movies. I've gone through and added a cripe ton of movies that I've seen throughout my life. If you're ever interested in like, if Dan has seen this movie, you can literally look it up and see if I've seen that movie. So it's super simple, and I like having the ability to go through and just like literally make a list of all the movies that I've seen, so I can actually go back and reference. I've actually, like, for a lot of these questions, I've gone through that list and looked at some stuff, and you can actually kind of go through that list and say like sorted by best reviewed, worst reviewed, and all that stuff. So it's really interesting little tool for me to use, particularly when I'm talking about movies, because I've seen so many movies and I really can't just recall every single movie off the top of my head that I've seen, and it's nice having that big, wide database to go to. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Simon also asked, movies you refuse to watch for one reason or another. I really fell off on the, like, not another movie, like the disaster movie and all that stuff, an epic movie, and I liked Scary Movie well enough when it came out. I hadn't even seen Scary Movie 2 when it hit theaters, and after the fact, I kind of didn't see that until way later as an adult. And Scary Movie 2 is okay. There's some of the stuff that I don't really click into, but some of it's funny. Some of it's not. Yeah, it's kind of like the first one. Scary Movie 3 I saw in the theaters. That was the first one that was PG-13. And noticeably so. They were really trying to go for some stuff in that one. Yeah, no, those movies really kind of diminishing returns as that series went on, and I ended up buying Epic Movie, I think, because it was like marked down and used at Blockbuster, and I used to buy used movies all the time for the video store. Just because it was cheap and I could kind of build up my collection. And I had seen like Not Another Teen Movie when I was younger, and I was a kid, so it was funny to me. I'm sure going back now, that's probably not that great. Chris Evans is in that. Hey, Chris Evans. He's wearing some whipped cream at one point in that movie, and that's it. It's supposed to be like that Varsity Blues movie, I think. I think that's what they were parodying. I didn't see half the movies that movie was parodying. Either way, I bought Epic Movie and I started watching it. And I think the second or third time a character threw up, which was roughly 15, 20 minutes into the movie, I was like, okay, I'm not going to waste any more money on any of these. I think Superhero Movie ended up coming out after that, and I was like, nope, I'm done. Like, Superhero Movie, you think I would be the audience for a superhero movie, and yet by that point I was like, nope, I'm sorry. I know you have Leslie Nielsen, and I think that's sadly, I think one of the last movies he did, if not the last credit he has. That makes me sad. I haven't gone back to those. And like, you know, I when I was even younger, there was Shriek, If You Know What I Did Last Friday the 13th. And that movie was garbage. And I think I saw it more than once. So, you know, I have a pretty, like, I've seen plenty, like, you know, parody movies are fine. You have movies like Airplane. Those are classic. Airplane's a classic. Airplane 2. I never saw Soul Plane. Was that any good? But, you know, that was at the height of, you know, when the scary movies were going on. So the parody movie, and until it kind of makes some sort of proper comeback and, you know, kind of gets back to Spaceballs level, which who knows if we ever will. We'll see if I can ever get back to that. But those are kind of like, those are movies I'm not interested in ever really getting back to ever. Yeah, that really sounds like a nightmare to go back and watch any of those. I remember watching a little bit of Scary Movie 4 and also a little bit of Scary Movie 5. And holy shit, do those get really bad. So, yeah, I am totally done with all those not another whatever movies, epic movie, romance movie, shit movie. Movie 43, that was one. That was a garbage movie. Some of that, there was one or two jokes in there that I laughed at overall, but that was an anthology movie. Oh, it's an anthology comedy movie. Oh, I was talking about that earlier and I didn't even realize. Yeah, no, I'm not into movie 43. That movie sucked. Do you think that's why Anna Faris and Chris Pratt got divorced? There's a whole short in there where Anna Faris wants Chris Pratt to shit on her. It's the whole short. It's the whole thing. It's the buildup. He's not sure he wants to do it at first. And then he's like, okay, I'll do it. And he does it. Was it shit or piss? I hate that movie. Okay, so Simon's third question, director with only flawless movies. Well, I've been known to suck off one Mr. Christopher Nolan. I don't know his middle initial, otherwise I would have pulled that out. Much like I pulled out his pain. I love Christopher Nolan. I think he's a great filmmaker. I think he's a little too obscure sometimes. And I watched an interview with him recently, and he was talking about how like he feels like non-linear storytelling is like one of his strengths. And if you have a strength, you should, as a filmmaker, you should play to that. And a lot of his movies obviously do that. Some of them are a little bit more straightforward. You have something like The Dark Knight. That's a straightforward story. I don't think there's any cutting back and forth in that one, really. There's no real hopping around. I think Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises have a little bit of flashback jumping around, but Dark Knight is a roller coaster ride that's doing its own thing. And I think, you know, for that reason, is kind of amazing. And Inception, like, plays into that really well. Interstellar, also kind of cool the way that works. Dunkirk, needless, complete needless kind of obscuring of the timeline, just to kind of tell it out of order for some reason, and it doesn't really change much. So I don't know why that was kind of told out of order at points. But yeah, so, you know, not completely perfect, not completely flawless. I don't think there's any filmmaker that is completely flawless. I think even Kubrick has some swings and misses, and he's not always 100% consistent in all of his movies. Any filmmaker has something to learn from one project to another. You can see the flaws in some of the movies. I think any movie, even The Dark Knight, there's moments in The Dark Knight or Inception or movies that are some of my favorite movies that I'm like, there's always something that kind of takes you out, or one little thing somewhere that is kind of like, that's the thing, otherwise it'd be perfect. You know, I don't know if I've seen a movie that I've thought is perfect. But there are some that just flow and gel so well that are just such a pleasure to watch. And I have a bit of a darker sensibility, so I tend to get attached to the melodramatic and the dark and something that has maybe a little bit of humor to it as well, maybe a little bit of a wry, dark sense of humor. So, you know, that's why I think I can go through a lot of Nolan's work and kind of really, like the cinematography also helps. Like Wally Pfister, the fact that Wally Pfister shot the first, I think, oh geez, he shot up to Dark Knight Rises, right? Yeah. I think Interstellar and Yeah, Interstellar is the first project where he wasn't working with Wally. So Wally Pfister was Christopher Nolan's cinematographer throughout, Memento on to Dark Knight Rises. And all those movies made within that time, if you watch them all like in a row, if you ever have yourself a Christopher Nolan marathon, like those movies visually, despite, some more than others being a bit more grandiose because eventually, when it comes around to the Dark Knight, they discovered the IMAX format, not discovered the IMAX format, but they adopt the IMAX format, which before that wasn't really being used for feature films, and shot the opening sequence, that amazing opening sequence of The Dark Knight, the bank heist. That obviously sets some things visually a bit different because, from then on, they're using a lot more IMAX footage. But I love that anamorphic style filmmaking that Wally brings to those movies. And they all look very of a piece. They all look, despite, them being visually different per movie, there's different color palettes and all that stuff. Visually, they look like companions to each other. Now, I'm sure Wally probably wouldn't like that because, I'm sure he's trying to do different things. But like just the way they're shot, they are all shot. You can tell it's the same person shooting each movie. And it kind of bonds those movies together for me into this perfect kind of compendium, from Memento to Dark Knight Rises of this like Nolan anthology up to that point, like that's an era for me of these really great Nolan films. But you get around to Interstellar in Christopher Nolan's filmography, and he switched over to Hoyt van Hoytema, cinematographer who shot Interstellar as well as Dunkirk. And both those movies look amazing, and I think he's a really fantastic cinematographer. So, and I think at this point, Wally Pfister's trying to go off and do his own directing stuff. He's directed episodes of The Tick, as well as he directed that Transcendence movie with Johnny Depp, which didn't quite do as well. Although I do like that movie. I don't dislike it. That's a weak movie in some of the filmmaking aspects of it, though. I think it's a little long and it's kind of muddied in the way that it tells the story. It's trying to be very kind of Nolan-y almost because it is shot like a Nolan movie but despite it not being a Wally Pfister shot movie, he wasn't the director of photography for that one. He had somebody else on that movie, but it looks like a Wally Pfister movie, which is interesting as far as like shooting goes. So unfortunately that one didn't pan out as well. I think that's a movie that kind of got a bit overlooked by people, or people just didn't really click into it. And I think the movie itself is kind of like, I don't know. I think that one probably bears repeat viewing for me, just because I only saw it the once, despite me like kind of more so going back and thinking on it a lot. So I think I need to go back to it. And I think I do own it. Pretty sure I did buy it. So I need to get back to that at some point, give it a review. And Simon Bouchard's last question. Any directors you love despite them having a lot of bad movies? A filmmaker I feel who gets a bit of a bad rap is Kevin Smith, and he kind of gets it from himself as well, although it certainly comes from an external place, and then he internalizes it and then externalizes it again, because he's always talking about how people hate his movies, and he kind of shits on himself, and he's like, well, I'm the guy who made Yoga Hosers, so don't fucking listen to me. Like, which I thought Yoga Hosers wasn't terrible. I thought it was watchable. I actually got like halfway through Yoga Hosers, and I leaned over to Liz and I was like, I'm not hating this, and she really didn't like it. I don't remember the end of Yoga Hosers. I might have been pretty high. Either way, I feel like he really kind of shits on himself. And yeah, he hasn't made a million great movies, but I think between Clerks 2, Red State, Tusk, I haven't seen all of his catalog. There's a lot of the ones in between that I have not seen. Chasing Amy, Dogma, Mallrats. I've seen a good chunk of Mallrats on TV, although it was like on a cable channel. It was on one of the like Showtime or something like that. So it wasn't cut up or anything. I was actually able to watch it uncut, but I only saw parts of it. So I saw chunks of it. I think I was coming in and out of the living room and stuff while it was on. So I think the last part of the Mallrats that I saw was when Stan Lee popped up. I think that's kind of closer to the end, though. So either way, that was the first Stan Lee cameo that I think I ever saw in a movie was in Mallrats. Either way, Yeah, I think he's a little rough on himself because I think he's a pretty decent filmmaker. I thought Tusk was good. I thought Tusk was really good. I thought Red State was great. I did, but he kind of shits on Tusk a lot. I think I like Tusk. I like Michael Parks' performance in that a lot. I like Johnny Depp in that, surprisingly enough. Him playing a French Canadian detective is kind of weird. And it was fun for the time because I had no idea what to go in. I saw Tusk in the theater and I had not seen one trailer or heard one thing about the movie other than I knew it starred Justin Long and it was called Tusk. That was it. And directed by Kevin Smith. I knew that. And I loved Red State. So going into it, I was like, oh, hell yeah. And I left that theater being like, what the fuck did I just watch? That was awesome. I liked it. So yeah, I think he's kind of unfairly shat upon, but at the same time, he kind of brought it upon himself years ago. He kind of had a bit of contention between him and the critics when Cop Out got shat on, which rightfully so. That movie sucked. So that's not his fault. But Foley, there was a lot kind of at odds with all that stuff. He had a bad time making it. It didn't come together well. And the critics didn't like it and they shat on it and it really kind of ruined his chance for a sort of, that was his first shot at big studio movie, I believe. Yeah. Before that, it was all Miramax and, working with the Weinsteins, Bob Weinstein, right? Bob and Harvey. Obviously, Harvey went the way he went. But I think he was a pretty big, person under them because, of Clerks. Clerks was their big indie darling for quite a while. And I know he was pretty popular within the Miramax system because I think a lot of those early movies he made were all distributed by Miramax. Either way, nitty gritty Kevin Smith stuff. I think the guy's a really great, talented filmmaker. And I tend to love the man because I think he's a super uber nerd who is just adorable sometimes. And other times he's funny and I like his insight on stuff. So yeah, then Shyamalan, M. Night Shyamalan, I think he kind of can be very hit or miss. And I'm not a crazy fan of all of his movies. Sixth Sense, Signs, Unbreakable. Those were kind of my favorites when I was younger. I didn't see Unbreakable until I think like mid 2000s. I missed out on that one. I saw Sixth Sense and Signs. And then I saw Unbreakable when I rented it years later. And I was like, this is the movie he made after The Sixth Sense. Why isn't this movie more popular? Like, what the fuck? At this point, I mean, we have Split and Glass. So hell yeah. We got at least the end of that trilogy, supposedly. So that's really neat. I didn't hate Glass. I know a lot of people didn't like it, but there was some weak filmmaking in there. See, that's the thing is like, he's not the best filmmaker sometimes, despite being one of the large contributors of filmmaking as a whole. He gave us The Sixth Sense, the movie that had that fucking huge ass, just kind of pop culture penetrating twist. And then obviously the persona that came after of him being the twist master. I like Signs. Liz and I rewatched that the other day. That movie is not poorly made. I really like it. I like the filmmaking in it. It's really subtle and over the top at points. Like he can be actually subtle, which is nice. I like him being more subtle than over the top. But he has like this jokey dialogue that he writes into every single one of his movies that takes you out of the movie. I think in Signs it works. It was funny. Like some of it actually plays, but some of it doesn't. And you see it in Split as well. All of his movies, it's all of his movies, but in Split, he's the character doing those lines outside of James McAvoy's characters. I think James McAvoy is a little bit more, he draws you in, and it's kind of fascinating the different characters he's playing. So the goofy dialogue within some of those characters is fine. That works for that character. But Shyamalan also plays like a computer guy who's like doing computer searches for the old psychiatrist lady in Split. And the dialogue in that scene, I think they were talking about Hot Pockets or something. I can't remember what they're talking about, but there's like, it's just like, that is the telltale Shyamalan writing jokey dialogue into movie thing. And like each one of his movies has those things. Glass has it, Split has it, Unbreakable has it. Lady in the Water has it. Lady of the Water was where I really dropped off from him. Like, I saw that in theaters. I didn't see The Village. I had never seen The Village. I've seen the end of The Village, so I know the twist, but I have not myself seen The Village. I saw Lady in the Water in the theater, and that was after The Village. And I was like, what the hell is this? Please, M. Night, please. And then he went on to do Last Airbender, which I watched probably a good hour of, and I was so sad. I couldn't finish it. I was like, this is so boring. Why? How could you make Avatar: The Last Airbender boring? Come on, man. You're taking a beloved cartoon series that is great, by the way. I never finished it, but I enjoyed it so much. I loved that series so much. There was that really kind of dry period where the name M. Night Shyamalan really was like just poison for whatever. He produced that movie Devil. He made The Happening. That really didn't help. And so The Visit really did pull him out of that rut that he was in. Jason Blum producing that movie and then making like that on a shoestring budget and him having to work with a shoestring budget again. I think that really did him well. Although that movie is full of M. Night Shyamalan dialogue. That's just jokey dialogue. But I think that movie's watchable. Although that was the one movie of his that I leaned over to Liz early on in the movie and I actually like figured out the twist. I was like, and she was like, oh. Because like Liz was hoping for something kind of like supernatural, because that's what the trailers kind of made it look like for The Visit. Like something was wrong with these old people and like maybe they're like that grandma's possessed and stuff. So she was looking for it to go kind of like The Taking of Deborah Logan sort of way. If you saw that movie, that was on Netflix a while back. It's a horror movie, I think found footage as well. And she was kind of hoping for something like that, and then it ended up being what it was, and she was kind of disappointed by that. But I didn't think it was a terrible movie. I thought it was certainly watchable and kind of a return to form for him, like, a lot of people were saying. Then Split came around and really turned people's heads around, and then I think Glass has really split people as much as, as much as... I mean, I don't know. Maybe it is like an even split. I enjoyed it. I've seen a couple other people who have enjoyed the movie a bunch. And then I've seen a bunch of people who really don't seem to like Glass. So I don't know. Maybe it wasn't that. I'm with you. The first maybe 10, 15 minutes of Glass had me worried a little bit. Maybe just the first 10. Because I was worried about Bruce Willis and his son character. The acting in their first scene wasn't that great, and the dialogue wasn't that great, and it had some of that Shyamalan-y dialogue, and I was like, oh no. But then it got really strong in the middle, and I was like, okay, this is certainly turning around. And then I liked the ending. I didn't like the ultimate ending, but I liked the quote-unquote twist, one of the twists. But I think the end of the movie isn't necessarily earned. But I get the idea and I like the idea, but that's kind of that wonky filmmaking coming in there. I can't really kind of talk about it without getting into more specifics, but the last scene of the movie I thought was kind of dumb just in the way that it played out and just the presentation of it all. And I'm kind of like, this is kind of weird, but overall I liked the ultimate conclusion of the movie. I liked the idea. I just think the execution was kind of bad. So there are directors. I think I love every director. I don't think there's one filmmaker out there outside of maybe Rob Cohen who has because Rob Cohen has consistently made bad movies that I have been excited for. And then I watch and then I'm like, why did I expect anything different from Rob Cohen? Oh, he's the guy who made like Stealth and the first Fast and Furious movie, which isn't terrible. I like the first Fast and Furious movie, but that's the only good movie of his I've seen. He made Alex Cross. That movie fucking blew. And that could have been good. He also made The Mummy 3, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. So, you know what I mean. MC Eleanor, or Mick Eleanor, asked, what's a department in film that doesn't get enough recognition? Set design, sound mixing, editing, etc. Well, I mean, a lot of things are kind of like, readily apparent. I think, set design, costuming, as much as they are kind of background, it is all surface. That's what you see. So, you know, cinematography, set design, certainly things can go unnoticed, but like that's all overt. Those are the things you're noticing. Those are the things you're literally seeing. So I really feel like editing a lot of the time is kind of the unsung hero of a lot of stuff. Certainly everything has to come together. You know, you have music, and I think if everything's working well enough, nothing should be noticeable, you know, unless you're going for style over whatever you're shooting for, really. If you're shooting for style, obviously things are going to be, you're going to be shooting for the look more so than anything else. But like movies, I think are operating at the best point when, you know, music, cinematography, costume, set design, editing, everything is working in unison, gelling, and you're not even like paying attention to the workings of it all. So much of watching movies comes with the visuals. So that's what I find. Editing has to be so perfect. Editing has to be good, or else it will take you out of a thing. If you linger on a shot too long, it will be weird. If you linger on a person too long, it'll be weird. If you cut too early, it'll be strange. It'll take you out of it. It'll be like, I didn't have enough time to process the visual information of that shot. Like, there is a lot that goes into the editing of a scene. As an editor, that's something that's overlooked by a lot of people, is the work that goes into making you not notice the work, you know? So there's a real art and science to editing that I feel like goes unsung throughout the industry a fair bit. I try to keep an eye out for editors whenever I'm watching credits for things, or, you know, people in general. I look out for producers and composers as well, and cinematographers. But editing is something I always try to keep an eye out for. To see new names or old names. You know, Stuart Baird's one of my favorite editors of all time. I think he's a really fantastic editor and filmmaker. He's directed 3 movies: Executive Decision, U.S. Marshals, and Star Trek Nemesis. Each one has a decompression sequence. I don't know why. It's a specialty, I guess. But he also edited, like, he did re-edits on the Richard Donner Superman, the original. He worked on movies recently. He worked on Skyfall. You know, he did 47 Ronin, that Keanu Reeves movie. He did do that. Most recent project he did was the Tomb Raider movie. So that dude is still kicking. He's still editing. He's still kicking some ass. And he's been an editor. He's popped up so consistently throughout my life that he has been one of those editors to watch. Plus, he's an action editor. So despite him editing some great movies, he's edited some shitty ones too. And some shitty ones that had some bad editing. If you want to see him at his best, Skyfall. If you want to see him at his worst, Vantage Point. Go and watch Vantage Point. There's a car chase in that movie, and that movie is so flashy with how it's edited. The whole point of the movie is it keeps showing you the same event from different points of view throughout the entire movie. So it'll keep playing out real time the event, and then come to the end of the event and then skip back to the beginning again with a different point of view or a different thing or whatever, you know, kind of deal. Like they might be a little bit more skippy at points, but they're showing you different perspectives of the same event over and over again. It's like there's a speech going on or something like that, and then there's a bombing that happens, and you know, there's Secret Service everywhere, and it's like this whole thing. That movie has a chase scene in it that has, my brother and I were counting the cuts. Like it had 60 cuts within a minute or something like that. It was like cut. Like we were literally saying cut every single time they cut, and it was like that. Cut. And it's like that. How can you watch something that's cut like that? You know, and they were trying to replicate the Bourne, probably the Bourne sort of style. But even then, like Bourne is watchable as much as that is the birth or popularization of the shaky cam fight sequence. They still do it well enough and right, you know, but people really tried to take that and woof. You know, Battle LA is one of those movies, Battle Los Angeles, where they kind of go a little overboard with the shaky cam. Like there's some scenes in that movie. It's like, For the love of God, why are you still shaking the camera right now? There's no reason. Is the wind blowing really hard? I think they're like all the aspects of filmmaking are important. I think there's plenty of unsung heroes of costume design and set design and, composing and cinematography that just aren't as often recognized. And people need to kind of keep an eye out. As much as you're looking at the people starring in a movie, you'll have a better idea in your filmmaking or, theater going experience going into a movie, knowing the creative forces behind it. So getting into writers and knowing who writers are, what writers wrote what directors wrote what, or, directed what, what projects they've worked on, what projects they've produced, all that stuff. You can kind of get a better idea of what movie experience you're going to have. And you can kind of take control of your movie experience a little bit more like that. Because then, a lot of time people just go see a movie and then they'll watch reviews, and the reviews will give you the information like directed by this person and written by that person and all that stuff. But, you certainly could be more aware of it yourself. And I think people probably have a better time, maybe. Just treat movies like your sports, okay? I don't know what I'm saying. But either way, no, I like getting into the nitty gritty of movies, and I certainly understand not everybody's into that so much. Or you could just, leave it to me and I'll just tell you all the stuff. Don't worry about it. McEllener asked also, what are some films that would work better as a show? Kind of tapped into this a little bit earlier. Like I was talking about the Jack Ryan series. Those were movies, although those were books. And then they, that was a large book series that were being adapted into the movies and then eventually was adapted into a TV show. That's been pretty popular in the last, 10, 15 years, I feel like, taking a lot of the franchises and movies and stuff from, kind of our childhood or some stuff like that, or my childhood, I should say, about my age range, and turning them into TV shows, which is kind of weird. I guess you got that, like I said, Jack Ryan. Right now they're doing that with the Marvel movies. They're turning those movies into shows. I think they just talked about the premise of the Loki show that they're going to be having on Disney Plus. I think that's what it's called, right? Disney Plus, Disney Play, something. Their streaming service, Disney streaming service. They're going to be doing a Loki show that's like Loki going throughout history and affecting major moments in history or something like that. It's supposedly, it kind of sounds like something like Quantum Leap, where a character is hopping between characters and, at different moments in time. So it's like him going through different time periods and being a bit of a trickster. So that sounds kind of neat, actually. But that's certainly like the lines between movies and shows are certainly blurring now. And at this point, we're getting TV shows that are taking place in movie universes, particularly around the MCU, I guess this is the biggest example of. But I don't know if there are any other really examples of that. Maybe Star Trek, where you're switching between shows and movies. But, you had like they adapted Frequency really randomly, the Dennis Quaid and Jim Caviezel movie from the early 2000s that Garth Brooks made a song for. That was a good song. I remember that. I remember that music video. It was the clip from the movie. Anyway, they made a show out of that. The whole crux of that movie was Dennis Quaid is a firefighter in the I think 60s or something like that. And his son in the future, he ends up dying in a fire, and his son in the future, through their ham radio and a certain, there's a, Aurora Borealis happening that is causing them to be able to talk through time on the ham radio. So he can talk to his dad back in the 60s and prevent him from dying in the fire. And that's kind of the basic story of that. And things kind of get more complicated as they start changing time and all that stuff. So, and it becomes kind of a cool back and forth of, timelines working in tandem at the same time while time is changing, and it's kind of neat. It's a little bit of a tough concept at points to kind of I don't know if the movie fully follows the time travel line very smoothly, but overall it was an all right concept, and I think that's what they took for the show. I didn't watch the show. I don't know if it was any good. Scream as well. That was a big franchise from my childhood. I loved the Scream series. Could not get into the show. I watched the first few episodes and I was like, this is all right, but I miss Ghostface. I don't know why they do this weird porcelain doll mask. Supposedly the third season is supposed to be like a hard reboot of that series. Although I haven't heard anything about that in a while, so who knows what's going on with that. I think the idea of maybe taking the Quentin Tarantino universe, you know, because he has like the whole, isn't it like Red Apple cigarettes or something like that? And I think like Vincent Vega? What's the guy's name from Travolta's character from Pulp Fiction? I think his character had a relative or was related to one of the guys from Reservoir Dogs, but also I think there was a relative in Django as well. So there's like tangential connections within the Tarantino movies. I'd love to see him do television. You know, he could do long form TV stuff within the universe of his, you know, content. I really hope, because supposedly he's only doing one more movie. If he's to stick to his word, then the next movie he does after Once Upon a Time in Hollywood will be his last. According to him, he doesn't want to he said in the past, he doesn't want to become an old, you know, dull director. He wants to do, you know, 10 and done. And supposedly his next movie after that is Star Trek. And I don't know if I want to say I hope it gets made, because that sounds amazing, Tarantino doing Star Trek. Especially if they said it 100% will be rated R if he does it. And, you know, he's eyeing to have it written by the guy who did The Revenant, I think. I think the guy who wrote The Revenant is writing that. That'd be interesting. Star Revenant. But yeah, no, so that I could only imagine what a Quentin Tarantino, you know, just make an anthology show. He could work with a million different actors, get all the actors who always wanted to work with Tarantino. He could write a short form, 1 hour long story or 40-minute long story per episode, write a season. He can get his creative jollies off and really kind of get wacky. He can do whatever the fuck he wants. Make it a whatever the fuck show. One episode could be an anime. The next episode could be a fucking hyper violent drama, you know? Live action. I really think, I mean, like, I don't know about a specific movie of his to adapt to a show. I mean, Kill Bill could be very interesting. Like maybe do some sort, like that would be kind of cool to take that concept or maybe even that story and kind of elongate it, or maybe even tell the history of the, what was it? Cool Force 5, Hit Force 5. What was the name of the group? Because she was Black Mamba within the group in Kill Bill. I'm talking about Uma Thurman's character. Either way, I think, you know, maybe showing the history when they were all doing their hit squad stuff together in the past. That, I mean, that could be something. I think there's a ripe idea there for Tarantino. I know he was talking about doing some TV show stuff, I think at some point, like doing a television sort of format thing. So who knows? Who the hell knows? If the Coen brothers were going to do it with Ballad of Buster Scruggs, I mean, I could see Tarantino do something like that. But although they ended up making it a movie, so, you know, they bailed on the TV show idea. But either way, I think that would be a great idea. I don't know if y'all think it's a good idea. What do y'all think? Is there anything like a good show, or I mean movie, I should say, that to adapt into a show? Let me know what you think in the comments below. McElenore's last question, or MC Eleanor. Eleanor, is it MC or like McEllenor? Well, it's MC period. So I'm assuming MC. MC Eleanor. Final question. As a director, would you rather work with like-minded people or crewmates that you disagree with on the creative front? I was trying to recently find, there was an article I wrote when we had the Creature Hub website going, back during the office days. I wrote an article about my experience making the Five Nights at Freddy's short, because that was the first kind of, I don't know if that was the first big short. Yeah, that had to be the first big creative short we did in the office. That was kind of like a big thing where I was, you know, directing and writing and doing the cinematography for that and trying to get it shot and put together. And that was kind of a longer gestating project too, because we had to do some reshoots on it. And then I had to quick get it done before RTX, which was amazing showing that short off, because you know, it was a labor of love. It took a lot of work. But when shooting that, I didn't really write anything outside of the basic conceit of it. Like I wrote out all of Jordan's stuff because that needed to be filmed and cut into the thing, and obviously needed to be, but otherwise it was just, the robot creatures dicking around. So I left it, kind of I didn't have too many ideas, but I left it to everybody else to really kind of come up with random shit, and everybody brought their A game. Like everybody was just ready to dick around, and almost to the point where everybody was kind of getting a little too overboard with stuff. And I was like, okay, like it's just, I don't know what's happening, but like I just kind of let it happen. And as much as I wasn't like at the time, I was like, okay, let's try to focus on this a little bit more. It was still nice to have people who weren't, they weren't necessarily locked into my mindset with it. I was focusing on the larger whole and trying to figure out how it was all going to come together. But I was really grateful for the creativity they all brought to it. Everybody was game to just grab a bunch of random shit and dick around and have fun and come up with a bunch of funny random gags for me to cut in. Because I didn't like fully understand, I figured I would just cut to one or two things, and like they made it so much funnier. Just because of the random shit they decided to do. And when we just kind of had the camera set up. So I remember at the time I was getting a little frustrated though, just because people were cutting up a little bit too much, and I was trying to focus and get what we needed to. But you can't surround yourself with completely, obviously you want to have people you can work with. You don't want people who you disagree with or who disagree with you to the point where you can't come up with a solution. And you need to be collaborative as a director. You need to be able to be open to whatever ideas come around, because there always could be a better idea. That's the biggest thing is you shouldn't really be too married to your way, because you are not doing it all yourself. You are working with other people. So you have to have people that you can have a disagreement, but actually work towards a solution or towards the best available option within the project, or whatever your problem you're trying to solve, or whatever thing you're trying to come up with. So I think it has to be a balance. It has to be a balance of people, obviously, that you have a shorthand with, or you can develop a shorthand with, or that you gel with well. Otherwise, disagreements are fine, but you have to be able to work around to a solution. Ultimately, it has to be people who aren't going to be, you can't have stubbornness on both sides. Otherwise, nothing's going to get done. Joseph Almamead says, honestly, I just want you to watch the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy and tell me what you think, especially about the soundtracks by John Powell and the 3 songs by Jonesy or Johnsy for each. Smiley face. I haven't seen any of the How to Train Your Dragon movies, and you obviously know that. I should get to those at some point. I looked to see if they were on Netflix, because I remember seeing them on Netflix at one point, and apparently they have Netflix exclusive cartoons and like a short, but they don't have the proper How to Train Your Dragon movies on there. So I guess they don't have the rights to the movies, but they have the rights to the animated things. You think they would keep them on there. Either way, I'll have to track down some copies of those and get through them. I've seen the trailer for the new one like a manillion times. A manillion is not a word, but sure. I've seen the trailer a whole bunch at the AMC recently, so it looks great, and I've only heard good things. Jordan always had good things to say about those movies, and I have not seen them myself. I've just seen little bits and pieces, mainly from trailers. There's just 3 of them, right? I thought there were 4 of them for some reason. I thought this new one was the 4th one, but I guess I could be wrong. At this point, they have all those Netflix things. Maybe I was just getting confused, but I saw they had like 6 seasons of a cartoon, like of an animated thing. So I don't even know how many, like, is that still Jay Baruchel doing the voice for the, anyway, How to Train Your Dragon. I would love to get it at some point, or get to those at some point. So keep an eye out at some point, Joseph, because I would love to. And last, but certainly not least, we have Drone's artwork asking if it were all up to you to persuade people to watch a movie that you love, that a majority of people hate, and to convince them to give it a second chance, what would you say to them, and what would that film be? Ooh. For this one, I went on my Letterboxd, and I went and sorted by like the worst reviews, and it kind of took me several pages to go through and try to find a movie that I was like, I love this movie, but clearly people don't like it. Like, obviously there are some movies. There's like BVS, like Batman v Superman. Although I I loved that when it came out, and I loved it even more when I saw the extended edition. And then it just kind of died for me a little bit as time went on, because like I like BVS a lot. I love Ben Affleck's commitment as Batman in that movie, as Bruce Wayne. He's all in on that movie, and everybody's all in on that movie. That movie is all in on itself. But a lot of people didn't like that movie. And then Warner Brothers hyper course corrected for Justice League and took out any connection that movie was trying to set up with anything. So Zack Snyder's trying to do this kind of long game thing where he's like planting things into this movie. And I can't stand movies that end on the note of, and then there's more adventure to be had, but not really ending. And BVS is a movie in and of itself from beginning, middle, end. For the most part, obviously Superman dies at the end, and that, you know, is fixed in Justice League. But there's more, like the Flash stuff not connecting anymore, like, and that not ever having really a moment, like to make sense the way Zack Snyder was planning on doing the whole dark side thing. It kind of bums me out and really kind of does really damage that movie. Although the movie itself still works as like this movie where Batman's on the edge at the end of his rope and he's thinking he needs to kill Superman. Look, okay, I don't think it's the most amazing movie ever, but I don't dislike it. I really still do like Batman v Superman, and I think, but there's no argument I can make to make people watch it. That's the thing, is like, at this point, I don't even have a argument to say, well, it connects to things that will eventually happen. No, it's not going to. And a lot of people still have their own individual qualms with that movie. So I don't think I'm going to be changing any minds on Batman v Superman. But speaking of misunderstood Ben Affleck properties, Daredevil. When Ben Affleck was announced as Batman, all anybody brought up was Daredevil and about how much Daredevil sucked. Did I miss the train? Like, I saw Daredevil when it came out. I understand Daredevil. The movie is not the best movie in the world, but here's the case I'm making now. This is the movie that I love that a lot of people generally don't like. If you don't like Daredevil, if you've seen Daredevil, I implore you, this is kind of like Batman v Superman, where around the time when that came out and the extended edition came out, it was like, watch the extended edition. It's way better. It fills in some gaps and it's more of a complete story. There is a rated R cut of Daredevil that actually does give more story and more character stuff to like Matt Murdock as a character, and kind of fleshes out some stuff a little bit more than the other one does, and the original cut. And there's a little bit of side boob or under boob, I guess. It's kind of unnecessary, but it's in there because rated R. Ugh. I never thought that Daredevil was terrible. There's just some things in it that are a little over angsty and kind of ridiculous. Like it is a very heightened movie. And it's, you know, that early 2000s superhero movie before superhero movies really hit their stride. So I get it, but at the same time, that's not a terrible movie for me. I don't think it's horrible. And rest in peace, Michael Clark Duncan, because holy shit, I forgot he's gone. And that makes me sad. He was Kingpin in that movie. Anyway, I feel like people need to give Daredevil a second shot. Give it another shot, y'all. Don't you remember? Joey Pants is in that movie. Joe Pantoliano. And Kevin Smith's in it. Full circle. There we go. We brought it back around to Kevin Smith somehow. But yeah, no, that movie I don't think is the worst in the world. And maybe I need to go back and watch the rated R cut. It's been a while since I've watched it. But if you could hunt it down, I think it was on Netflix at one point, the rated R cut. But I own it on Blu-ray. I bought it a million years ago at Walmart. So yeah. That is my movie. If I were to convince people to give it a second chance, give Daredevil a second chance, preferably the rated R cut. See what you think about it. Has it aged well? Coolio's cutscene is in it, so, you know, if you're a Batman fan, Coolio was in Batman and Robin. Do you remember he was in that scene with Alicia Silverstone where she sneaks out of the mansion and then goes off to the illegal bike race that they end up racing up a statue at one point? I don't know what the fuck happens in that movie, but he did the Daredevil movie with Batman playing Daredevil. Either way, everybody, thank you so much for all the questions that people sent on the Patreon. I appreciate you. I appreciate your support. I appreciate everybody watching right now. You're so sweet. If you made it this far, oh my goodness, you are a super trooper. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you. Be sure to tune in to the next episode of the Danz Newz podcast. The Patreon exclusive podcast should be hitting around the end of the month, so keep an eye out, and I will talk to you all next time. Bye, everybody.